The Drum Candy podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into episode 9 of the Drum Candy podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This week, I'm handing over the interview duties to Thomas Wendt, and he is interviewing the great Willie Jones III. Willie was born in Los Angeles, and he wanted to be a jazz drummer since he was a little kid, and he eventually moved to New York City around 1997, where he started working with everybody, including the late great Roy Hargrove. So I'm going to let Tom do some introduction here and then hand it over. So enjoy this conversation with the jazz great Willie Jones III.
Hey there, Thomas Wendt back guest hosting another edition of the Drum Candy podcast. As always, such a pleasure to be here. And today I'm really looking forward to sitting down and talking for a while with one of my favorite drummers playing today, the fantastic Mr. Willie Jones III. Willie has a long and distinguished career, and he's just as active as ever. And I believe he has a new recording out not too long ago. We're going to be talking about all that and more. So let's get started. All right, welcome to another edition of the Drum Candy podcast. Such a pleasure to be guest hosting today. And today we're really honored to be welcoming as a special guest one of the baddest drummers out here doing it. He's been that way for a long time. Really happy to welcome the wonderful Willie Jones III. Willie, thank you so much for being here, man.
How you doing, Thomas? Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, man. Our pleasure. So I thought we could get started with your beginnings as far as the music and the drums go. You're originally from the West Coast, right? From L.A.?
Yeah, born and raised in L.A.
Yeah. So how did you come to the music? I know your dad was a musician, so could you fill us in on the rest?
Yeah, so my dad was a jazz musician. He played piano. So I kind of grew up around the jazz scene around LA. So I was very fortunate that he, ever since I could remember, he took me to rehearsals with him. I've been to a few jam sessions with him. And then I just remember like musicians coming by the house. So and plus I was exposed to his record collection, stuff like that. And I just gravitated toward the drummers. Mm-hmm. Always, there was always vocalists, horn players, but I just naturally gravitated toward the drums. And I was always beating on furniture. And eventually my parents were like, okay, we need to buy him some drumsticks. Yep. Get him some drumsticks. And I had a practice set. That was this is like maybe even before I started school. Wow. I had a practice set and I was beating on that. And from then on, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. Even in grade school, I played in the grade school orchestra. And middle school, I didn't play in the orchestra. I was really into basketball.
Nothing wrong with that.
But high school, I was in a marching band, and then that's when I really got serious about practicing and technique. And I started, more importantly, high school is when I started collecting records.
Yes, sir.
Jazz records. And so I really became familiar with Art Blakey, Max Roach, Roy Haynes, so Tony Williams. That was, and from then on, I knew I wanted to be a professional musician. From high school, even though, I was serious about practicing, being in the drum line and marching band, but I really it was like the next level of seriousness when I was in college. And I started going to jam sessions and sort of sitting in with musicians around Los Angeles, realizing how good I wasn't.
I know that feeling.
So so it was like, okay, I got a whole new level of homework to do. But from then on, it just carried on and I just kept going. And I was fortunate to have mentors besides my father. People like Billy Higgins, huge mentor for me. Donald Dean, another drummer.
Yeah.
still in LA, still playing great.
Yeah.
Roy McCurdy.
Oh, man.
Henry Franklin.
Oh, yeah, the skipper.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not name dropping. These are these are people that I knew and still know. Some of them, Ndugu Chancellor, Tootie Heath, who was actually my drum teacher at Cal Arts.
Oh, wow.
So,
man.
Yes, I got real close with him there, and I skipped over someone. My first drum teacher was Clarence Johnston.
Really?
Yeah, in LA.
Oh my gosh.
So like he played on a lot of records in the Blue Note records with Freddie Roach.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And but he was my first drum teacher.
Oh man, I was not aware. Okay, so we have plenty to talk about there.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about a few of those mentors, in particular Master Johnston and Master Billy Higgins?
Yeah, in that order. Well, I'll start with Johnston, Clarence Johnston, because he was he used to do gigs with my father. They would make gigs together. So I guess I was maybe 13 or 14 when I started studying with him, and I wasn't serious about practicing at all.
Yeah.
Like it was, I loved to play. I loved to play drums, but practicing was a whole nother monster. But Clarence introduced me to really the rudiments and how to approach them, how to practice them. And then he introduced me to the Charles Wilcoxon book. So, and I wasn't serious about really working out on that book, but, I still have that same book, that he introduced me to this day. So it's those things that he just motivated me. So they were fast forward maybe 3 years later when I wasn't studying with him, I'm in high school. The things that he talked to me about, I started implementing those things in high school once I got serious about practicing. And so, yeah, I mean, he used to host a jam session also in Hollywood. I can't think of the name of the place, but every Sunday night he did a jam session. Wow. And so he would let a lot of the young drummers come by and sit in. So that was some of my first experience of even playing jazz in a live setting with experienced musicians. Wow, man. So, yeah, Clarence Johnston. I mean, he was the greatest.
Yeah, he's certainly one of those guys, that deserves so much more recognition. I was listening to that record Jawbreakers yesterday that he's on. Man, I mean, he was truly one of the great rhythm section players of all time.
Yeah, he was incredible.
Yeah.
And Higgins, who I actually met through my father also, but I didn't really know who he was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's I just knew I knew him as the guy who smiled all the time. I knew he was a drummer, of course. Him and Lawrence Marable.
Oh man.
But Billy, again, years later, once I realized who he really was, he opened a performing arts place called the World Stage, which is still which still exists to this day in Leimert Park area of LA. I started going there when I was about 21, and they would have jam sessions every Thursday night. And that was it's one of the greatest places, probably the greatest place for jazz in LA. I mean, it's a place where musicians can express themselves, poets, dancers, vocalists.
Wow.
All kind of workshops, stuff like that. And so, I started going there, and I met some other young musicians.
Could you describe what that place was like physically? Like what kind of building? I've never been there, unfortunately. Could you describe kind of what it was like?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly. So it wasn't a club. It wasn't a jazz club. It was more like a little storefront. It almost looked like, if you didn't know what it was, you would think maybe it's like a nickel and dime store.
Oh, wow.
Or a thrift store, just a little storefront. And then you walk in and there's all these chairs and there's a little stage with a piano.
Wow.
Like it didn't look like a, like a club at all.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it was the greatest. It was a great time for me,
Wow.
and Billy was always on the road. As soon as he would come back home, he'd go by the world stage and talk and hang out with all the young musicians and let us know whatever he's working on at that moment. But I met some other young guys, namely Mark Shelby, bass player,
mm-hmm.
and Richard Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And we formed a group called Black Note.
Yeah.
That was, that really Billy sort of mentored us and got us together and produced our first record.
Mm-hmm. It's a great record.
And so, yeah, I mean, the world stage is still there. Like it moved after the pandemic. It moved across the street.
Oh, okay. Oh, nice.
But it's still on the same block.
Man, yeah. That's beautiful, man. Wow, that's incredible. I hope to make it there one day. I'm not on the West Coast too often, but it's on the list next time I'm there. Could you talk a little bit more? And I'm being a little self-indulgent because I saw Billy Higgins play twice, and they were two of the greatest musical experiences of my life. So I'm always really interested to learn more about him from people who knew him and were close to him like yourself. So could you talk a little bit more about some of the things that you got from him and some of the things you guys talked about when it came to playing and even other things?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of stuff from him, a lot of advice, a lot of musical advice. He was the first one that told me I should move to New York. Because I mean, up to that point, for me, making it was just if I could make it playing real jazz gigs in LA and pay my bills, I've made it. Like that's what I was looking. That was as far as I was looking.
Yeah.
Can I make a living in Los Angeles as a jazz drummer, playing straight ahead? But he was like, no, this is not it. You got to go to New York, and it's a whole nother world. From there, you'll go to Japan, to Europe. You'll get to record. All this stuff that just seemed like a whole nother universe to me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But he schooled me on that. I mean, he introduced me to tons of musicians.
Yeah.
Musicians that I mean, when guys would come through LA, whether it was Cedar Walton, Barry Harris, Jackie McLean, Max Roach, I met them all. The first time I met them all through Billy Higgins. Because Billy was working with them.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you name it. I mean, he even had Herbie Hancock come through, and Herbie was, well, I think he still lives in LA, but he wasn't really coming through the world stage like that. But Billy had him come through and do a workshop.
Wow. Man.
It was incredible. So, I mean, just give me advice. Like once I decided to move to New York, once I made the decision, I mean, he kind of opened the gates for me. Like he told musicians in New York to look out for me, certain musicians. So, I mean,
nice.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one specific thing.
No, that's okay. That's okay. It's all good.
It might come to me random.
That's okay. That's all right. That's all right. It's all. I mean, those kind of remembrances are important. So let's pick it up from there. So when did you move to New York, and who were some of the first people that you started working with when you got there?
Oh, well, I moved there in 97.
97.
Yeah, but let me say this. This is one more. This came to my head.
Go ahead.
Like people ask me, well, did you study with Billy? I never studied with Billy Higgins officially. I didn't take lessons with him. But in a way I did, because I used to watch him practice.
Oh, wow.
So, I used to, he would go to the world stage late at night and just play the drums.
Wow.
We talking like 11:30, midnight.
Wow.
With the lights off, turned off. So if I pulled up, because sometimes there was no jam session, nothing happening, you just drive by to see if some of the cats were hanging out. and he would, I could hear the drums. So I would go in and the lights are off. It's completely dark, but he's practicing. And his way of practicing, he was just playing.
Yeah.
Like he was on a gig.
Wow.
You know, he wouldn't, like we're talking 30 minutes, like he's playing, and then maybe he would start just playing time, and then he would start soloing.
Mm.
Or maybe he's trading eighths. Then he puts the sticks down, and then he switched to brushes. Like that was one of the most valuable lessons I could ever get from someone like him.
Yeah. It's amazing to hear those, when you hear those masters, to be in the room and to feel that vibration. You know, there's no record that can do that, you know, as much as I love the records, you know.
I mean, seeing it in person is priceless.
Yeah.
So, but back to your other question. So I decided to move to New York around, like I made my mind up around 95. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't make the move until 97.
Okay.
June of 97, I moved. I was playing with Arturo Sandoval at the time. But I had started playing with Roy Hargrove, which was the gig I was kind of eyeing anyway. Like that's where I wanted to end up.
Okay.
Playing with him. You know, but his manager would call me for little gigs here and there. So I was just biding my time, still playing with Arturo Sandoval. But I moved to New York in June of 97. And whatever I was doing in LA, and I was doing pretty well for a young drummer. You know, I mean, I was playing straight ahead gigs in LA, which is like an accomplishment within itself.
Sure.
You know, like I didn't have to do a wedding gig or fusion gig here. I was just doing straight ahead. So I was happy. I was straight.
Yeah.
But I moved to New York, and my first gig in New York actually was I played a week with Arturo Sandoval at the Blue Note. So I was like, just buy me a one-way ticket. You know, I'm good.
Yeah.
And then shortly after, I started playing with Horace Silver. He called me, and I did some gigs with him, and I actually did a record with him. Toward the end of 97, early 98.
Yep.
So I was pretty busy from the jump.
Yeah.
When I moved to New York, because I was still playing with Arturo.
Mm.
And I started working with Roy some. And I was working with Horace Silver also.
Yeah.
You know. And then by early 98, around March or February, I started working with Roy Hargrove full time.
Okay.
I quit. I left Arturo's band. And Horace physically wasn't working as much because he wasn't feeling that well by that time. So I was just playing with Roy from 98 on. And it was just, everything just fell in place.
That's great, man. Among the older musicians that you've worked with, could you talk about some of the things that you've gained from those gigs? People like, Cedar Walton or Arturo, or Horace Silver, any of the, the older masters that you've worked with. You worked with a lot of them. Could you talk about some of the biggest things that you've gotten from those gigs that's sort of helped your own playing and your own development?
I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've gotten from, and specifically I'll say Horace Silver, Cedar Walton, and Hank Jones,
mm-hmm.
who I played with later on. But from those three, don't take yourself too serious. Take yourself too serious. Like, I mean, Cedar Walton, I knew his music, front and back, because he's one of my favorite musicians of all time. And whenever, whenever he was playing in town with Billy, I was there.
Sure.
So same thing with Hank Jones, you know, and Horace Silver too. I mean, they hired me because they trust me. They trust how I would interpret their music.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there was no micromanaging going on. And sometimes you can, as a drummer, but for any music instrument, you can work with someone and they want their music a certain way, as they should, like, you know. But
sure.
But for me, to the point to where you're micromanaging how a person plays, you know, it kind of takes away, you know, bringing the best out of that musician.
Absolutely.
Music.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
From Cedar, like Cedar never told me, I want you to play this song like this.
Right.
You know, we sit down, you know, we rehearse, we play, you know. If he hired me, he automatically knows how I play.
Sure.
He trusts how I play.
Right.
So same thing with Hank Jones. They you know, matter of fact, if anything, I've done gigs with the younger musicians who I would say like, oh, well, they want it just like this.
Yeah.
Micromanaging. And I'm like, you know, okay, well, I'll do the best I can.
Right. Well, yeah. What else can you say?
Like, you know, I hope you like it. You know, but I mean, the older guys, the masters, they're not checking for me like that. So
yeah,
that's the most important thing. I mean, and even like whenever I do a gig with my band, whoever I hire, young or older musicians, if I hire them, that means I automatically like the way they play. You know,
right.
Here's a skeleton of the tune, or here's a frame.
Right.
I need you to fill it up.
Right. Do your thing to fill it up. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is another sort of self-indulgent question, but I'm really curious. So could you sort of compare and contrast from the drum chair the difference between playing in a trio with Cedar Walton and a trio with Hank Jones?
Well, one huge difference is that Cedar, we were playing his music, meaning his original. Like he has a whole song. You can make a fake book.
Oh yeah.
Of Cedar Walton tunes.
Oh yeah.
Hank had a couple of originals, but mostly he played standards.
Right.
Or he had, you know, standards that he had like special arrangements for. But that was the biggest difference. I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, Cedar. I mean, that was the greatest thing playing with him. Like all his. I thought I knew most of his tunes, and I was like, oh man, I don't, because he had much more than I thought.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that was the difference between like Hank and Cedar.
Okay. Interesting. So let's kind of switch gears for just a second. As you were developing, I'm talking about when you first started to really get serious in high school through, you know, your early mid-20s, what are some of the things that you were practicing and focusing on as far as working on in the practice room?
Well, like I said, in the beginning, it would be just the discipline of practicing rudiments, paradiddles, double paradiddles, flam accents, or whatever. Just
sure
having a discipline to like practice them slowly and get them clean, get my technique clean.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next level is, okay, well, how do I make music out of it? You know, and that became apparent, like, especially when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
Because by that time, I'm making gigs. You know, people are calling me, and you know, I could swing. But taking a drum solo is like, okay, the challenge is making music out of your solo without it sounding repetitive or just sounding like, you know, a bunch of rudiments sewn together.
Right. Right.
You know, I mean, I'm still struggling with that to this day,
Me too.
you know. But at that time, it was a real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, I could play. Okay, I got single drag. Okay, switch triplets. Okay, cool. Well, but how do I make music out of it? You know, one thing I started doing was, okay, well, you know, let me just, if I could hear the song, if I could hear the tune, you know, if I could hear the form, the song form, that would be the beginning of me making music out of my technique. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it would be the start of it.
Sure.
You know, so I mean, like when I'm soloing now, like if you hear me soloing, you know, usually I'm playing the form, I'm playing the tune, even if I'm not that I'm playing the exact melody.
Sure.
But I'm playing the form, and maybe, you know, the goal is to, like, I want you to know we're at the bridge. Now I'm not playing the melody, but you should know. Okay, now we're at the last A. Whatever. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So being able to, like, sing, if you could sing the melody, okay, you can hear it, then you could try to solo while hearing the melody. You know, that's the goal for me.
Sure.
Like if I'm, like, you can tell if I'm playing it, even to this day, if I'm playing a tune and I don't know it, you know, but they're like, okay, it's 32 bar tune and you're going to take a solo.
Right.
You can hear, like, okay, I mean, I could fake it. Like, I could play 32 bars.
Sure.
But you should be able to hear the difference. Like, okay, although, like, to me, that's even the next level.
Yeah.
To be able to, okay, you can play a tune that you don't know and solo over a 32 bar tune that you've never played before, but you can still make it sound like, oh, you've played that form a million times.
Right. Right.
But for me, I'll just be playing, if I don't know the tune, I'll be playing more figures, drum figures, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like things that I know, okay, that's 8 bars.
Yeah.
Okay, 12. Like that, this is a combination I know is 10 bars.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, as opposed to, if I know the tune, you know, like playing with Roy Hargrove for so many years, I knew his tunes by ear. I knew
Sure.
so I never soloed thinking about what the form was. Because I knew the tune.
Yeah.
You know. So I mean, those are the levels for
Got
me.
you.
Like in the beginning, it was just, okay, man, can I just transform technique, the rudiments, the vocabulary to sounding musical?
Sure. Could you talk about some specific records that figured prominently into your development, stuff that you listened to and really got a lot from?
Yeah, that's easy. Because I mean, in the beginning, like, because it started off with my father's record collection. So it was specific records that he had, like Clifford Brown Memorial record with Art Blakey on one side and Philly Joe was on the other side. And so, I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the songs.
Whale Bait.
Well Bait, that's Art Blake. That's the side with Art Blakey.
Yeah, that's the first side.
Hymn of the Orient.
Hymn of the Orient.
That's
the first side. Yeah.
That's Blakey.
Yep. I'm blanking on some other titles too.
They played Cherokee.
Oh yeah, right. But he doesn't play the melody. He's just blowing.
Right. That's my first time hearing Cherokee.
Oh, interesting.
Not Max and Clifford.
Yeah.
It was the Clifford Memorial record with Blakey.
Oh, interesting.
And it might be John Lewis playing piano on that side.
I think that might be right. I haven't played that record in a while. Yeah.
Almo Hope is playing piano on the second side.
Absolutely.
But like Well Bait and he takes a solo. Blakey takes a solo on Hymn of the Orient.
Yeah.
But it's really, he's not soloing.
Right.
it's a groove.
It's just a groove, yeah.
It's one of the first solos I ever really paid attention to.
Wow, interesting.
And then all the Miles Davis records from Relaxing,
Sure.
Working.
Yeah.
My father had all those records, so of course, I mean, I just played those. I scratched those records off, wearing them out, you know, and also Kind of Blue, of course.
Sure.
Trying to think. Oh, also, and it's funny because I didn't know who it was. McCoy Tyner's, the one with Roy Haynes.
Oh, Reaching Forth?
Reaching Forth.
Yeah. Yeah, with Henry Grimes. That's a great record, man.
For whatever reason, my father didn't have the cover. He just had the record. So, like, you know, you go through the records and there was the record. You know, the cover wasn't there. So, but I know he played Theme for Ernie.
Oh, yeah.
On there, you know, and then the up-tempo tune, Reaching Forth, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, Have You Met Miss Jones?
Yeah.
But those were the early records that I really paid attention to. And again, there's a few more that I'm forgetting.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
But, I mean, I could throw Maiden Voyage in there.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, that one. Just Playing Time.
Yeah.
Dolphin Dance.
It's amazing, yeah.
I mean, those records I was listening to when I was like 9 years old. You know, so yeah. I mean, I wasn't serious about practicing at all. You know, forget practicing, but it was the enjoyment of hearing those records, and then I would pick up the sticks and try to play.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about the Black Note Group? I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how you guys sort of came together and about how, you know, that first record came together with Master Higgins.
Yeah. So, all right. So Black Note. Okay. So I'm talking about the world stage, but actually there's another club that I should mention that was in the hood, that was in the neighborhood, like around the corner from the world stage, actually, a few blocks. There was a club called Memory Lane.
Oh.
Marla's Memory Lane. The actress, Marla Gibbs,
yep,
from the Jeffersons. She had a jazz club. And so they had a jam session every Sunday night. Okay. And Donald Dean, the great drummer Donald Dean, was the house drummer.
Oh, wow.
And Rose Gales, Larry Gales' wife.
Wow.
She ran the jam session. She was the piano player.
Wow, really?
Yes, she ran the session.
Wow.
So I started going there first, you know, and so I, you know, to all these young drummers waiting to play. So, you know, you wait in line to play and you're like, oh, I hope they call me up to play something fast. or you're thinking like, I hope they don't call me up to play with a vocalist.
Yeah.
or on a ballad, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking. But so they called me up and, you know, and so I took a solo. And I remember right before I left, this guy runs up to me like, hey, you know, like the way you play, you know, my name is Mark Shelby, bass player. So he was the one, I met him, and he was the one that told me about the jam session at the world stage. He's like, you got to come by the world stage on Thursdays.
Oh, wow.
So me, him, and trumpet player Richard Grant, we linked up the very next week. You know, we linked up at the world stage and we just started playing. We would play almost every night, it seemed. Wow. You know, from like maybe from like 9 to midnight, we would just play the nights that they weren't having jam sessions. And so from there, Mark Shelby, he's from Sacramento, so he had a gig in Sacramento. So we drove from LA to Sacramento.
Wow.
To do one gig. Right?
Yep.
In my truck. So that was the beginning. Like, we weren't even called Black Note. yet, but that was the beginning. Like we were making little gigs here and there. And then eventually James Mahone, alto player, he came in. I believe we met him. He came to the world stage also, just, because different guys were coming to the world stage for the jam session. So James joined us soon after. And then maybe a year later, I met a trumpet player at Cal Arts named Gilbert Castellanos. Great trumpet player. He replaced Richard, who I believe he started going to school back east at Rutgers. So,
okay.
Gilbert became our permanent trumpet player. But before, I say all that to say, before he joined us, we did our first record, 43rd and Degnan.
Yep.
And so, again, Billy Higgins, he was always talking about, number one, moving to New York. But he also talked about the power of owning your own music, So, yeah, so he always, so he said, well, I'll start a record label.
Wow.
World Stage Records. We were like, man, okay. And so we recorded our first record, 43rd and Degnan, for him, for his label. And actually it was produced by a guy named Dennis Sullivan.
Okay.
But I mean, it was Higgins' label.
Yeah.
He funded it, everything.
Wow.
And so that was the start of Black Note really taking off. And then eventually we got a record deal with Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, going back to the different levels, because I thought we had made it. We got a deal. Like we were playing, we would tour all over California.
Sure.
And then we even went to Europe once.
Wow.
Opening for Winton.
Oh, wow.
Like summer of '94. But yeah, we did one record for Sony, then they dropped us. And then we got signed by Impulse.
Right.
We did one record for them, and then they dropped us. So it was about that time that I was like, you know what, it's time for me to bounce anyway.
Yeah. I hear you.
Go to New York. And everybody in Black Note, everybody kind of, Marcus went back home, or he went to San Francisco, which is where he is right now.
Okay.
He runs the Hellsburg Jazz Festival.
Okay.
Still plays bass great. And James Mahone went back to the Bay Area. So everybody went their own way.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Thank you, man. Thanks for filling in all those gaps. No, it's really interesting, man. I like those records very much. It was a great group. So again, to kind of switch gears, I wanted to talk to you about some of the more recent stuff that you've been doing, especially all of the band leading that you've been doing, and you kind of have your own record label now yourself, right?
Yeah, sort of.
I hear you.
But yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, it's my motto is one project at a time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I do. I mean, if for no other reason, out of necessity.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Because I mean, really, it came down to, okay, so Black Note gets dropped. We couldn't get anybody else to sign us. I moved to New York, and you just see different young musicians around you doing record dates as a leader. And I started doing record dates as a sideman almost right away.
Sure.
But I saw some other young drummers doing records for labels, and so I tried to go the same route, basically.
Okay.
I couldn't get any takers, so.
Yeah.
And there was one label, a small label, that I did a lot of sessions for as a sideman. I couldn't get them to record me as a leader, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I said, well, that's cool. I'll do it myself.
Did the band leading come first and then trying to get dates as a no?
The recording came first.
Recording came first. Gotcha.
Yeah. Probably the band leading, maybe it should work the other way. I'm still not sure.
No, I hear you. I don't know if there is a right way.
I go back and forth about that. But for me, the recording came first.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I was working so much as a sideman that I figured, let me just go ahead and do one project and see how it does.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm curious about band leading. It's something that I've started doing in the last 7 or 8 years of my life, and I'm always curious to talk to drummers who are band leaders and sort of talk about your concept for doing it and some of your experiences that you feel have sort of made you a better band leader over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still struggling with that.
Fair enough.
Not musically though. I mean.
Oh yeah.
I'm very confident in the music.
Yes.
It's the presentation of it.
Ah, yeah.
Like getting
Absolutely.
on. Okay, do I speak on the mic? When do I speak on the mic? Did I say enough?
Yep.
Like, I mean, so, yeah, that's a struggle for me. Probably always will be. I will say this: the more I do it, especially if you're, and this is also the struggle. You never work enough as a leader. At least I don't. Like if I'm on the road for 6 weeks doing one-nighters, I'm sure by the end of the tour, my presentation microphone will be pretty smooth.
Right.
But that's not the case. For me, a tour is like 1 week.
Dig it. I hear you.
That's what it's come to. Can I get a week of gigs or a week and a half? I'm like, great. But yeah, that's the struggle, is like trying to, okay, man, how do I present this particular project that I'm doing now? The music, I'm always, the music is going to come off. I'm always confident about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting time to be living in general, but I feel like trying to play this music today and present it to 2023 society is that has such incredible challenges in so many ways, even beyond trying to sort of figure out how as a band leader you want to present stuff. It's trying to reach people who are so distracted can be such a challenge,
Yeah, I mean, it's a definite challenge. I mean, but in some ways, because of technology, you could say it's easier, maybe. I mean, people do podcast or live stream.
Yep.
So that way you can bring an audience to you.
That's true. That is true. There's a lot more personal control in some ways.
Right. But whether you go that route or not, I do feel, and I mean, I haven't mastered this at all, but I do believe, like there's an audience out there for everything. Whatever style or whatever music that if you're passionate about it, there's an audience for it. You just have to find it.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. You're right. That's a really great way to look at it.
Well, now, if you're playing jazz music, okay, so that's a much smaller audience, but still, you go find it, or bring them to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's all real.
Yeah, and let me say this also, like anytime I've done a gig and some people have shown up, like I've always gone, this is something that we're into. For me, the challenge is convincing the venue or promoter to take the chance.
Absolutely.
on bringing me in,
Yeah.
bringing the band in.
Yeah.
You know.
No, it is. And it's funny. As time goes on, the people who present the music get younger and younger. And with that, many of them don't quite know the music and the culture of the music. And I think would you agree that can be a big hurdle sometimes when you're trying to do stuff?
Definitely. I reached out to a club once that I had already played at, right? Go figure. So, and I think I did this decent numbers, but I reached out to them like 2 years later, and they're asking me about my numbers on social media.
Yep.
My numbers weren't good enough.
It's funny, man. It's a real issue today because, I'm 44 years old, and so my generation, I grew up with rotary phones, no answering machine. Like, I'm old enough to remember the world like that, but I'm young enough that I understand the technology, I understand the importance of it and using it, but I have to say I really struggle with it, and how to use it and how to deal with it,
Yeah, I mean, this is the game. This is where it is. So, I'm doing the best I can. I can always do better, but there's you have no choice. If you want this, you have to compete in this arena.
Yeah, that's
okay. Numbers, social media. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
If you don't, then they're not going to hire you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's where it is.
I hear you, man. Let's talk about some of the recent projects that you've done, both recording and live. What have you been up to recently?
Yeah, so I just released a couple of months ago. The latest thing I've done on my label is a saxophonist, Ken Fowler.
Yeah,
great young tenor player in New York. He just put out a record on my label called Resolution. Great records. I'm playing on it. Gerald Cannon, Peter Bernstein.
Yeah.
Jeremy Pell.
Nice. That's a great band.
A good record. That's the latest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Fowler's Resolution. I have a record that's currently out, Fallen Heroes.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I released it last year.
Okay.
But that's the latest thing I have out. Again, featuring Jeremy Pelt and Gerald Cannon is on that one. Renee Neuville, great vocalist.
Yeah.
Similar cast of characters. These are guys, people that I work with all the time.
Sure. Sure.
And then I'm also working on releasing a new project that I'm either going to release in October or next year.
Cool. Great.
I'll make a decision on that real soon.
Beautiful, man. Fantastic. So just kind of one final question. What are some of the things that you're practicing these days? Do you still practice? And if so, like, what do you like to work on? And what's new in that realm?
I still practice. Practice every day.
Yeah.
I'm not working on anything in particular,
What are some of the things that you do regularly?
Yeah, well, I was going to say I kind of stole Billy's his format. Like, even when I do have something specific to work on, I try to spend 30 minutes just making music by myself, like playing like I'm on a gig, just playing, But aside from that, and also I try to work on my rudiments every day to keep my hands together,
Yep.
What I call mindless practice. Like, I might be watching the game or something.
Dig it.
But I got a practice pad in front of me and I'm working on, just doing rudiments and stuff. But also, I still try to spend like an hour maybe working on combinations.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm working on something I tried to play on the gig the night before.
Yeah.
That didn't come off. Nobody heard it but me. I heard it.
Right.
So, okay, let me try to work that out.
Yeah.
Things like that. Things like that I work on every day.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's all mandatory stuff, man, because if you don't work on it, it will work on you.
Exactly. If I don't practice for like 4 days,
yep,
and then I play a gig, I can feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true, man. It's true. So what kind of gigs do you have coming up? You got any gigs you want to plug before we sign off?
Do I have any gigs coming up?
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I do. Okay, you just said, see, I'm 10 years older than you.
Okay.
So I still keep a calendar book.
I do too.
It just works better for me to have it written down and I can see it.
No, absolutely.
But I just finished the gig. I played Birdland 2 weeks ago.
Oh, with Steve Wilson.
Steve Wilson.
Yeah.
Great band. His band, he calls it the Analog Band. But I got a gig coming up at Dizzy's.
Nice.
June 21st, I believe.
All right.
It's Danton Bowler.
Oh, yeah.
From LA too. And he's doing like a CD release gig.
Oh, nice.
So it'll be me, him, Justin Robinson will be on the gig.
Nice. Steve
Nelson on vibes.
Oh, man. From Pittsburgh.
Exactly. And actually, the music of the Senator, Eugene Wright.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Man, that'll be great, man.
Yeah, dance and study with him. So
yeah.
So that's the next big gig I got coming up.
Beautiful, man. And you have a website too. Could you give the address?
Yeah, williejones3.com.
Beautiful, man.
You find what I'm doing. I'm on Instagram, straight swinging 68.
Beautiful.
Facebook. All the music's on all the digital platforms, Spotify, iTunes, whatever.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. Man, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
That is it for this week's episode. Again, if you haven't already, head over to iTunes or Spotify or YouTube, wherever you get this podcast. Give us a 5-star rating. Make sure you type in a review. That helps rank the show higher when anyone searches for drums or drum podcasts or whatever. We greatly appreciate you listening and supporting. Also, you can always reach me at drumcandypodcast@gmail.com if you have any suggestions for topics, for interviews, or if you want to send in some questions or some intro beats. We'll get back to that. But until next week, have a good one. Go play some drums, and I'll see you then.